You're listening to the Adventuredesk podcast.
All right, Stefan, thanks for being on the show. It's great to connect with you again. I guess it's been, how long has it been? We're in February, almost March now, and so
yeah, kind of 2 years now.
Yeah.
So more or less, 1st of May was first day. I arrived on the 1st of May, and I started to work immediately. So I had no time to rest, not even.
And so I have a question about that specifically. You kind of left Spain, your role in TUI prior to coming to Condor Nuevo Mundo was managing director or commercial director?
Was MD, managing director.
And you got thrown into a CEO role for 5 different companies?
It was kind of weird because about 2 years before that, the CEO of TUI Group, Fritz Jussen, he came to Madrid and with a couple of other people, and they wanted to get to know the company, TUI Spain. Mm-hmm. And we just made the turnaround into Spain, and I explained fact base and the market and the competition, and then all of a sudden he said, okay, great, interesting, thank you very much. So he had been there for an hour and a half, something like this, and then a couple of weeks later, Sebastian Ebel called me. He's a member of the board, and he said that there is a plan. So to set up, let's say, a dynamic packaging platform with different players in the market, and whether I could do it from Spain in a dual role. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, why not? And then we kept talking about the project, and we involved many people from the technology part. There was one company involved called Peakwork AG in Düsseldorf, because they have a very new unique format, data format, where they compress data in a binary format in order to have big data in a big cache. Because when you have a big cache, then you have very good response times. It was like in milliseconds, and we started to do the business plan, and we said, okay, we are going to have it in Spain and in Portugal and in India, in Brazil, and in Italy. Oh. Yeah. So and then we all started. Okay, we kept talking to the bed banks and our let's say own inventory as well, and about channel managers. And the idea behind was that TUI, since they have so many companies and so many hotel inventory and flight inventory, and so at a later stage, the idea was that distressed inventory from TUI Group was going to be distributed through our 5 companies.
Right.
For example, if a Swedish colleague couldn't sell any longer the Canary Islands because of whatever reason, didn't want to dump the prices or whatever, but they could do the same thing with us, so we could distribute their inventory from Spain or from Italy or from elsewhere to that particular hotel. Above all, the idea was actually to fill up beds of their own stock, of TUI Group's own stock.
Right.
So that was the idea, and we created it so with a couple of people, and it was really fun, and they're still moving on. Yeah. So in that case, it was a huge experience. You do tour operating with cultural tour operating, let's say cultural tours for Spanish tourists, and then you have this dynamic part. So you touch all points,
right.
and top-notch technology. So that was a huge experience.
And you packed your bags. You came to Peru.
Yeah.
It's been a couple of years, but you came to Peru as in a CEO role of multiple companies. Mm-hmm. Again. So we have Condor, we have Nuevo Mundo, we have Destinos Mundiales, Agil, and Travelis. How does one prepare to be a CEO of that many companies? Where do you even begin?
It's Actually, I mean, it was sort of 20 years TUI, and then once in a while you get, let's say, contacted by a headhunter, and because your profile is in LinkedIn, for example, and then they sort of got in touch with me, and we had a telephone conversation, a very brief telephone conversation. They said, hey, would you be interested to work in Peru? And I said, let me check with my wife, and my wife is Spanish, so it wasn't too big of a problem. And we said, okay, we're not going to head for an adventure. Yeah, if we do this, we do it thoroughly and consciously, and so it took a couple of days actually, and then we said, okay, why not? And I signaled that I would be into it, and then we had plenty of conversations with all kind of people, and very interestingly, they didn't ask too much about my technical, let's say, skills, because they believed with my CV, more or less I would be able, because I touched all points like incoming, like corporate, all these kind of things, and they were like 60-70% of the question were related to cultural experience.
Right.
And how would you cope with your mentality, German mentality, for, let's say, for the Latin American market, and that was actually also through a psychologist, and I had many conversations, and I simply said, okay, even though my wife is Spanish, it has nothing to do with being more able or less able to adapt to a new country in Latin America, because I always say that I'm German and I'm from a small village, and the next village is like 5 kilometers away, and I don't understand them. How is it possible that I could understand, I mean, the Latin American mentality? And what I said to them is, okay, the most important thing is that you feel yourself as a visitor. You're an invite, let's say, and you have to adapt to the new situation and to go with prudency and very humble, to listen carefully what the other mentality is like, and then you get to know each other, and you build up trust and confidence. And I believe that, at least for me, it's the formula how to get along quite well with a different mentality. It's not only about Latin America, it could be Russia, it could be somewhere else. You have to be careful with where you are.
And I totally agree with that. And how I think it's not so much you go to one culture or another, it's the fact of, have you moved from where you grew up or where you know everything and been taken into a whole different environment, and how do you adapt your way out of that? That's a muscle that you can form over time, more so than just to say, how is a German who's lived in Spain going to adapt to Latin America? Is, well, you've done it by adapting to Spain and getting used to it, and so I would say you're much more prepared just by having that experience than someone that has basically spent their whole entire life in one place.
Yeah, it's maybe I have a slight advantage, because my father, he used to travel for 42 years before he got retired, and he always taught us that change should be part of your being. And because he came from all these different countries and brought gifts and storytelling and all these kind of things, and we accompanied him. I remember I was 6, 7, 8, 9 years to the airport, and the smell of, let's say, kerosene was there, and it sort of, I found it very interesting, and to listen to him, and sort of, I think that sort of influenced me a great deal, and I'm just able to adapt very quickly. My wife less, even though she has a Latin American, let's say, mentality more than I do. So, but I don't miss anything when I'm in Peru. I don't miss Germany. I don't miss Spain. I don't think about the food in Germany or neither in Spain. But when I'm in Spain, I don't think about the food in Peru.
You enjoy being in Spain.
I enjoy being in Spain. So that, I don't know, it sounds arrogant, but or a little bit, let's say, but I'm like this. I can adapt very quickly. So if the environment is good, the people are good, the team is good, so the job is good, the responsibility is good, then I'm happy.
And we work in a unique industry in the sense that tourism means it's opening the world to everyone, and how lucky we are to be able to almost work anywhere in the world based on our skill set. Like there's tour operators, travel agencies, there's many of these industries in every place in the world, and I feel like that is such a unique advantage to us, that if in your hometown or your city where you live in, those opportunities aren't there, they are somewhere. And so if you're willing to make that jump or that move, you can advance your career very quickly.
Yeah, to be honest, yes. It's all about adaptation. No?
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much about you have to be willing to do this. And I respect people; they're not so adventurous. Let's say, and to be honest, it was not an adventure at all, because we did it so consciously that my wife had a very small business in Spain, and she sold it. So it was the idea behind was, listen, when you go to Peru and being in charge of 700 people or 750 people, you can't do it like for a year. You don't find any credibility. No, they don't trust you, because they believe, listen, there's this guy coming from and from TUI, biggest leisure tour operator in the world, and he might get some money here and then ciao. And that was actually not the case, because we have no plan B. So we did what we did. We decided it, and when this sort of was communicated also and lived within the team, so the team started to open up a little bit. So otherwise, if Elvira would have stayed home, and I would have said, okay, she comes to visit me.
You go back and forth.
Back and forth, and that would have been.
That's not a commitment.
Not a commitment at all.
Yeah, but it's interesting you say that, because when you look at a company of that size and that many employees, the amount of interactions you get with individuals is actually a very small number, right? Like they have to be very meaningful interactions. It's hard to have. You don't necessarily get to see the same people every single day, and some people you're in a meeting once or twice a year with them. Like
it's horrible.
Yeah.
To be honest, it's horrible, because I didn't deliver in the first year, neither in the second year with my personal plans toward the teams. You always believe that you do it well, and you put things into an agenda, and then the agenda overhauls itself. And I've been twice in Chile. I've been once in Ecuador. I haven't been. I've been once in Brazil. But actually, every 3 months I should be out there, and also very. I feel almost ashamed that in the last year I haven't been not once in the 6th floor. So it's sort of you have so many things, so many priorities, and that's really, for 2020 I have this plan to communicate, physically much better than it was in 2019.
Yeah. I imagine it's difficult. I felt it very difficult with my 100-person team, and once you start getting comfortable, then there's some movements and some new people come in, and then you realize, who's this new face on my team, and
what's his name or her name?
Yeah, and then too much time passes, and it gets really awkward if you don't know their names. So sorry that I interrupt. It's when I first came. I went to every single, let's say, floor, and whoever I could meet, I shook hands for the first time, and I would like to remember all names, because when you, instead of saying hi, you say hi Matt. It's different. Yeah,
it's really different, and I'm still learning names. And maybe I've got some 100 now, from the 750, and my goal is to have 200 this year. That I meet people in the hallways, and they pass by, that I say, hola Alonso, hola Federico. Instead of saying, hey, how are you doing?
Because it feels like a tell every time that I'm just saying hello. and I don't know your name. So going back to your kind of entrance into this and knowing that you don't even get the luxury of dedicating your time to one single company, you have several big companies. What becomes your job as a CEO, or like how do you, because you could, there's so many rabbit holes you can go down and you can go so deep with things, but you have the same amount of time in the day that I have and everyone else has, so you actually then have to be picking very strategically what meeting, which area, like sometimes you have to jump from one business to the other. How, like, what is your strategy for organizing your own time?
It's I think it's it's always a challenge. You have a plan, and I believe in numbers, and I believe in the leadership team around me. So if you don't have numbers, you can't do practically anything. Because it's always based on maybe an ant will become an elephant, and you don't know how to judge. So the first thing we did is more or less introducing more and more numbers, so what you can't measure doesn't exist. So, but it's important that you measure what matters. So if you get this clear more or less, and you have a leadership team around you, then you work on this dashboard, and it's like a traffic light, and you have like green, yellow, and red. And whenever it gets between yellow and red, then I usually go and enter. So, and then I talk individually to that person and try to find a solution, and then I pull out. So because if you don't empower, then you get lost. And I truly believe in this, because I can't work with anybody who always says, I sent you a mail, haven't you seen, I copied you, and
you know that if it has to wait for you, then it's not.
It's not really nice.
You don't have the right people to drive it, right?
You need time to market. So, and the mentality in a leadership team should be a very open and transparent one, and very forward. Not hiding things. So because otherwise you can't progress. And the ultimate goal is always you want to do it 1% better than the competition.
I've heard you say that many times in meetings, right? So
sorry to repeat.
No, it's good to repeat it, because it means that's a critical belief that you have, right?
Yes, very much so.
Rather than trying to come up with something.
I'm passionate about this. Totally.
It's in the details, right?
Yes.
You mentioned earlier LinkedIn became a big thing for you in how this opportunity happened. Is that right?
Yeah.
How important do you feel LinkedIn is for professionals? Because I feel it's incredibly important in this day. I'm fully on board with LinkedIn.
Me too.
I think it's amazing.
So whatever I need, I look it up, and I navigate around, and actually it's a perfect network for the professional community. It's a worldwide network with a very high level of, let's say, commitment and articles and opinions, and people exchange views. Sometimes it's a bit, let's say, over, but in general terms, I would say like 90% of what you read and find is really good. And I think you get a feel for what people actually care about through the things that they share, that they like, that pop up in your feed. You can really kind of get a feel for a person's values a lot of the time. But personally, I feel, and I don't know if it's been the same with you, that for me, it's been critical for my career growth, that no matter if I've applied for a job or someone has sought me out, it's maybe checking a resume, but then it's going straight to their LinkedIn profile and seeing what they're doing. You see, this week 36% up searches for your profile. But I've just found it interesting. If I look at one single thing, for me, like to just be on a network and share what you've been doing, it's been a really huge piece for like the talent and recruitment side of vetting people, and you see that it's an amazing hiring tool when you're starting to look at new key positions. You can do so much with it. Like I agree 100%. I love it. And for me it was a game changer, because somebody looked into my profile on LinkedIn, and of course 20 years TUI, I haven't worked for so many other companies in my professional time, let's say. I actually worked for 3 companies, and but I was lucky to move within TUI into different, let's say, segments. Whether it was last minute, or whether it was incoming, or whether it was corporate, or whether it was tour operating, sun and beach, cultural tours. So and I was lucky that I was so flexible, and they gave me the opportunity in order to see all these different segments. So very rich. But in terms of Peru, it was the one and only LinkedIn that made me so to the public. I mean, that they found me there. Otherwise, I mean, they had a process. About 16 people were in the shortlist. So
no, it's impressive where it's come from, and it seems to be the one kind of whether I don't think you can call it social media, but that social network that still remains positive, and it's for the most part free of garbage, and it's not so much a time suck. It's you look on it, see what's going on, and then you get to go back to things. So you mentioned it, and I thought important to point it out. Switching gears a little bit. A big part of what you've done with Nuevo Mundo and your past has really been looking at online distribution, online platforms, and right now, to me, for any little guy that wants to get into the market, it seems like there's never been an easier time to get into the market and have a shot. You can very easily create a website right away, and rather than spending a fortune on Google AdWords and trying to get people, you can immediately register with online travel platforms that are unique to your customer niche, or all of these things. Do you think there's ever been an easier time to go to market for?
Not at all. I think it's a perfect time. The only thing is you have to know exactly what you do, and your target customer, let's say, has to be very clear. Otherwise, I mean, in the big ones or the medium ones, they will look at you immediately, and they won't, let's say, big part of those people, they won't let you grow, possibly. So the thing is, if you're in a niche position and you find your customer, and you say, okay, I have this direct communication to the customer, because you own the customer in apostrophes, and you have sort of a technological background, everything works fine, your invest is, let's say, a reasonable invest, until you start growing, until you get sort of a critical mass. And if you get this critical mass, then you have to be careful, in my opinion. So if you don't have content, you can have a beautiful platform, a beautiful layout, a UX and UI, whatever you wish to have, but if you have no distribution, and if you have to pay for the distribution, that you attract traffic, and you don't know 100% whether your traffic is qualified traffic, so that has an immediate effect on your conversion. And if you don't convert, so then you're out. So therefore, you need to have a very good product. And if you are a small player, small actor in the market, then it should be a differentiated product with a very good profile. And you say, okay, I'm autonomous. I don't pretend to be one of the big shots. And then I think you find your place. If
not being everything for everyone in each of the platforms, just simply to be there.
Exactly. If you don't have this clear, Matt, then most likely you won't succeed. You burn money in a second. So we have seen this multiple times. So on most of the online companies, I mean, they grew and grew and grew, but they never earned really money. There are only a few players that earn money, and they would like to add value by growing, and then to sell the database. So
because then and later on it becomes so oversaturated that you can't barely stand out. Like that's certainly my perception. If you look at a booking.com or an Expedia, that like it's just the sheer amount of product that is there, like that's not necessarily the right place to be anymore. It's no longer valuable as someone that wants to go to market. Finding your niche and someone that has that customer niche that is a fit becomes much more appealing, much more value for money.
Yeah, and correct. And I mean, nowadays, I mean, maybe 10 years ago, it was more difficult. Now, you can target a customer with a lot of technology. If you talk about artificial intelligence, for example, that helps you in order to communicate much better to your customer. And it also, when you have, for example, a very nice CRM system, it doesn't need to be Salesforce, for example, it can be a different one. But if you really have a segmentation within your product lines, a good mix, and you have qualified your customers as such, okay, this is this profile, this is this profile, then you can really communicate and start communicating. Also, you have to take care of the language you use, because a 20-year-old guy, he has a different language than the 35 or than the 60, and I think you have to take care of the detail. If you don't have the detail, if you're not customer-centric in a service-oriented business, it will be difficult.
Yeah. And people see through it, right? Like if in one type of travel style you're this, but in another type you're this, and the language all of a sudden changes on the same.
Exactly. That makes it unique. No? Yeah. I give an example. I shouldn't say so, but I say. We are far from, let's say, in Nuevo Mundo, for example, on Facebook, we're improving, but the communication towards the customer is not 100%, let's say, okay. Because if somebody has a question and the one who replies says not even hola, not even hi, but refers to a website, then it's not the right form of communication. So you have to get into that customer and try to understand what they really ask, and to give a little bit more of information. And not even if they ask, if you post an interesting thing about Ayacucho, let's say, and 900 people are communicating, then actually the community manager should start to go into this communication. And then you can really, let's say, Fidelizar, how do you say that in English? You sort of connect people to each other and to your brand also by language. So that's for me, it's very interesting and very important, and that you do it differently from anybody else. You have to have your own profile, that they say Nuevo Mundo or Condor Travel is unique in their communication skills towards the customer, because we compete with millions.
And on the point of this oversaturation, I mean, you're seeing kind of the return of the travel agent, and I'm not so sure, and you can correct me if it's that way in Peru, but in general, you see what you're seeing are millennials. They're going back to travel agents because there's so much noise, and now anyone can create a website, and they know, like, is this legitimate? Like, they don't want to necessarily sacrifice their hard-earned money on just an okay experience. They want to make sure that they're getting something amazing. You're seeing people go back to the travel agents, and Nuevo Mundo has just invested in this huge new store. So, I mean, what's your take?
It's, I mean, what we have, the philosophy was, okay, we can't handle only passengers through mono distribution. So we believe that there is a multi-channel approach, and to have a platform within all distribution channels, whether it's a telephone or whether it's the web or whether it's the shops. And it should be one system, and we're working on it in order to finalize that by the end of this year, that there is one platform, and wherever the customer goes, the one who is treating the customer has the same information. So if a customer goes into the travel store and blah 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 blah, wonderful, okay, I have this quote, but I don't want to decide. So then this quote needs to be stored into my profile on the web, and then when he comes home and he sort of said, yeah, okay, let me check on this, and he goes into my Nuevo Mundo, let's say, and then he sees his quote, and then he decides to call, and then the person in the call center says, okay, Mr. Yeah, I see what you have done, and blah blah blah.
He doesn't have to go and tell the story all over again.
So this integrated cycle of communication is a must.
And I think that's another mistake that, I mean, it's easy to get into the market, but for these companies, whether they're tour operators, activities that can get into and break through a Get Your Guide, an Airbnb experiences or something like this, it's a channel and it's a means of distribution, but it should by no means be your only means of distribution, because then they own you. Basically, they can change the terms, and we've seen this happen with Booking.com and hotels, that all of a sudden your whole business exists because of this one platform or this one means of distribution, and when it changes or when more people get in, that's your only strategy. It can't be. It has to be one part of it. And so this sounds like a very clear online strategy, social strategy, as well as targeting people locally and having an expert travel consultant that can meet them in person and guide them through.
That's the plan. And to be able to create personal websites for the customer.
Right.
Yeah. So that's another plan we have right now. So where our travel advisors, let's say, create websites for that particular customer. Yeah. And with their, let's say, wishes and whatever kind of information they can have, it's a particular website for the customer. So we're right now working on it actually, and it really looks good. So that's the next level of communication towards the customer, that the customer doesn't feel, I'm one of many. They actually care about my own profile, about my own travel wishes, and they care about me.
Right.
So because for me it's all about caring, because we are sometimes very arrogant in our industry, because we believe that we have seen everything, and we don't take too much care sometimes about the individual needs of the customer, because the customer trusts you. He gives a lot of money. Sometimes it's not the second, third or fourth time he travels, it's the first time. So he deposits his trust in your company and in that particular person. And you just have to deliver. Otherwise they go elsewhere. I mean, by having the multi-channel system, it doesn't necessarily mean that you own the customer forever, but at least you reduce the probability that they go elsewhere. So and you simply have to have a better communication than anybody else.
But you still have to, as you said, it still has to be a great product that, that meets their needs, not necessarily your organizational needs, because you get perks and incentives to push this one property. Or I think that's a big problem in our business, is that you go where kind of the most profitable providers or partners are, rather than the one that's going to be perfect for the client that's walking in the door.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Nothing to add.
Okay, glad we agree. So one of the things, we'll be wrapping up in a little bit. I'm not going to take so much of your time, but you started out in the beginning as a tour leader or a guide.
As both. So I went to places where nobody else wanted to go. So after I finished my study, I thought of what am I going to do, like almost everybody, and I saw an ad. Say people were looking, that was the number 3 in Germany at that time. ITS belonged to Kaufhofreisen, or to Kaufhof, which is sort of, you can compare it with El Corte Inglés, for example, in Spain. and they were looking for these tour guides, but taking care of clients in a sun and beach destination. So it was 95% sun and beach. And I was like, okay, I go there, and I applied. And I was accepted, and the lady, the HR lady, I will never forget, Frau Berbür. She said to me, okay, I mean your academical background, blah, 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 and you don't want to be a guide all your life. And I said, no, if there are possibilities in the company, I mean, to make jumps, very welcome. Yeah, okay, we sent you to Mallorca. first 9 months. And it was really a big lesson. So because this is mass tourism. And, so you receive people at the airport, you have to be nice to them, you have to service them, and then you put them into a bus, and then 50 people go elsewhere, and you drop them off, let's say, in different hotels, and then you have a welcome cocktail and all these kind of things. And after earlier, let's say during my studies, I went to Disney. I worked for Disney for a year, and I sort of got to know what service is all about. So that helped me at a later stage. And after 9 months, I was like, what am I going to do? I need to clean my brain. And she said, ha ha ha. Yeah, I knew it was going to happen because most of the people have this experience. And then 2 months later, she called me and said, do you want to go to ex-Yugoslavia, to Montenegro? And I said, yeah, good. You will be on your own. I said, okay, fine, no team. So I went to Yugoslavia in the winter, in former times was ex-Yugoslavia, and where there was still sort of 7 republics, and I was in Montenegro, for the winter time, and then in the summertime I went to Herceg Novi, and from Dubrovnik down to the let's say coast of Bari, and I sort of handled that, and that was a very difficult time also because the standard at that time, hotel standards, were not in the best shape. And then I afterwards they said, wow, you're doing well, now you're going to Cuba and then you're going to Egypt, and then I went back to Cuba and back to Egypt, all these strange places, let's say, where I really did well there, and I liked it very much. I liked the mentality, even though it was totalitarian state, sort of, and Egypt was like, there was only one, and in Cuba there was socialism, and of course when you go there you have to know where you go, and to adapt, and people buy their travel and buy their holidays with you, and you don't care, just don't care where you are, and that I loved it. So I did it for 3.5 years, and then there was this plan within ITS. There was a position, a vacant, as a trainee, a contracting trainee, and I raised my hand, and Mrs. Berbür said, okay. And then I had to make an interview with let's say the big boss, and he was a tough guy, but excellent, Wolfgang Roland. And he said, listen, young boy, if you think that this is an 8-hour job, you better go out. I was laughing. Then he tested me. He said to me later on, and he wanted to see my reaction. I said to him, listen, when you work in the fields, you have no Saturday, you have no Sunday. I mean, it's just good answer. Good answer. So I was lucky, let's say, although I don't believe too much in luck, I believe in hard work. My boss, my direct boss, was a lady, and she was really the toughest contractor I've ever seen until now. And of course, she had a market like Greece and Portugal and Cyprus. And I was with her, and she sort of trained me communication and negotiation skills with the hoteliers. And one day she said, okay, now we're going to contract Portugal, join me. And so we went to Portugal. The first day she got sick, and we had 3 days stay in order to do EKI's contracts. And she just did like this, here are the contracts, go. Yeah, so it went reasonably well, and then from there, actually, I had multiple responsibilities in terms of contracting, whether it was Greece, Cyprus, Balearics, Canary Islands, some long-haul destinations, and it was like from contracting trainee to contractor to product manager, and then in 1995 somebody called me in Baden-Baden, which is in the southern western part of Germany, and whether I would like to change sites. And then I moved on, and that was the company which later on sold to TUI. Last Minute was the biggest last minute tour operator in Europe, and called L Tour, and it was an amazing time because we started selling as early as 14 days before any arrival. So if we had shops, and we had telephone, and we had later on the internet, and we said, okay, we are going to take care of the distress inventory on the airline side and on the hotel side. We bundle them again and do dynamic packaging at that time. So I worked for them for 10 years. And it was just amazing how quick you had to be, because the term time to market has a different feel when you start selling as early as 14 days before. Yeah. When you have stock, maybe in 3 months' time, but if somebody comes into a shop or calls you or whatever and says, I want to go in 16 days, and you say, no, come back in 2.
Yeah, so go somewhere else.
Exactly. So we were always on the run, always trying to get offers from the hoteliers, from the airlines, and that was the, let's say, a big school to see how quick you have to be, and in order to be better, this 1% from the competition.
And you mentioned something of like doing the work that other people didn't want to do. It sounds like that was a very important part of you getting your start, and I believe that of myself as well. One of the things, I never really wanted to be involved in crisis management or dealing with customer-related problems, but I also, early in my career, seen there's an opportunity there, because many people are reluctant to go into the fire and deal with situations, and there's not really a right or a wrong way there for me. For me, that was all experience. So whether I go in and get my head bitten off, I'm going to learn a lot from this interaction, right?
Yes. And I had the same attitude. I mean, I loved it.
And so to me, that was very, very important for the growth, and somehow it spiraled into someone that manages crisis and sets up plans for these kind of things.
It forges you also. I mean, when you deal with so many different situations, then you sort of take, sometimes now later on, you take a step back and say, okay, you have been into this situation, and how did you handle that, and how would you handle that now under new circumstances?
And if you take that, and that's kind of my next question, is how much does that still serve you today? I assume it's serving you every day and every interaction you have with anyone.
Yes, because I truly believe that in our industry, there's not so many, let's say, the intellectual part, without downgrading the sector, of course. The intellectual part is not big. Mm-hmm. So you don't solve equations with 25 variables. You sort of have to buy well and sell well and treat the customer enormously well, that they communicate with other friends, family, whatever, that they've been treated well. So therefore, the human factor and the integrity you have towards the customer and towards the team must be 100%. Then you, in the end, you will succeed. For whatever reason, you might have a dip or things like this, but your attitude must be like this. It's all about attitude.
And you can always picture yourself in the shoes of the person that has to face the client, right? Because you've been there yourself.
And to be honest, I mean, when you're in Egypt and you have these round trips and you're a tour leader, and you are with these local tourist guides, they are kind of a personality. Mm-hmm. And also in Montenegro, I took care of one of the 3 most rotten hotels, where actually the tour operator sent 120 people every week on an anonymous basis, because they wanted to sell their remaining seats, and there was in the brochure there was one, they called it Vertrauensreise, the trust travel, and they got to know the property on site. When they arrived in Dubrovnik or in Tivat, then they got to know their hotel, but it was always the same hotel, and there were millions of situations where you had to deal with mass complaints and the welcome cocktail, for example, every week was with 100, 120 people, no mic, in a bar, and like 20 people complaining that the breakfast was not okay, that the bed is not okay, the mattress was not okay. So I actually felt it, and this is what still helps me when somebody else.
It tells me why these details matter with you when we do a big event and you're looking at these kind of things.
Yeah,
because
I get crazy.
You've had it go really bad before, right? So I think
crazy.
It's like in your nature to look around at those details that pass other people by.
Yeah, when I, for example, mice or incentives or whatever, if I don't see a checklist of the biggest or the smallest detail, whatever kind of toilet paper, how many rolls do you have, and at what time, and how, then I go crazy. People are so relaxed sometimes about it, and it's all about this stupid detail, which makes the difference. Yeah. And you have to make the difference. I don't know. I mean, it's I live this. I can't do it in a different way, and people hate me for this in apostrophes that I'm this detail guy. Yeah, relax, Stefan. Yeah, but I don't want to relax. I can relax afterwards.
Yeah.
So.
Well, on that note, we'll end this. I want to thank you for coming in. It's been a lot of fun. We've talked lots, but
I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
thoroughly.
You don't always get to have this type of a conversation with a coworker or a colleague, and no, it's been enjoyable and valuable for me. Thank you. You have a big job ahead of you with all the uncertainties of this travel market. But I'm sure you're going to lead everyone through it and do well. I wish you the best of luck, and thanks for joining me. I don't know if you want to promote anything that's going on in the Condor Nuevo Mundo universe. We'll do that after.
Only big thank to both companies actually, and I mean, so different, the receptive part and the, let's say, outbound part, nothing to compare. But in the end, we're treating with customers, no? And they have done, let's say, a great job in welcoming me 2 years ago very nicely. So it was very easy for us to be here. So I don't say it very often, so I say it here. Thank you very much.
All right, good stuff. Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you very much.